Open the cupboard of any British kitchen in 1974 and you would find it. The heavy, blackened frying pan that fed an entire family on next to nothing. We are counting down 25 forgotten British one-skillet dinners from the 1970s that almost nobody makes anymore. These were the suppers cooked on a single ring, born of tight budgets, busy mothers, and the long shadow of rationing that still lingered in the nation's bones. When the power cuts came and the 3-day week dimmed the lights, that one pan kept families fed. From offal fried fast to leftovers reborn with a sizzle, each dish tells a story of thrift, speed, and quiet ingenuity. Some will make your mouth water, others will make you wince. Which vanished supper tops our list? Let's begin with number 25. Number 25. Tinned pilchards in tomato sauce on fried bread were the supper that cost almost nothing and asked even less. Housewives kept a stack of those flat, oval tins in the cupboard, bought for around 8p each in 1973, ready for the nights when the purse was empty and the children were loud. The fish was tipped straight into a hot skillet, slicked with dripping, the soft pink flesh breaking apart in its own orange sauce as it bubbled and spat. Slices of yesterday's bread fried alongside until golden, soaking up every drop. Children either loved the salty richness or pushed it round the plate in protest. Fathers ate it without complaint, knowing tinned fish was protein when fresh was a luxury. Today the tins still sit on shelves, but the supper they once made has quietly slipped from memory. Number 24. Spam fritters were the deep-fried triumph of the make-do kitchen, a dish that turned a humble tin into something children actually cheered for. Housewives sliced the pink loaf thick, dipped each piece in a simple batter of flour, milk, and egg, then lowered them into a skillet of sizzling fat until the coating turned crisp and golden. A tin of Spam cost around 23p in the mid-1970s, enough to feed a family of 4 with chips and a spoonful of beans. The sizzle as the batter hit the fat was the sound of tea being ready. School canteens served them by the thousand, a Friday staple that pupils still remember with strange affection. Today, Spam carries a whiff of embarrassment, and the fritter has all but vanished from British plates. Number 23. Fried herring rolled in oatmeal was the supper of frugal coastal households, a dish that carried the taste of the sea into terraced kitchens far inland. Fishmongers sold herring cheap, a few pence a pair, and housewives knew the trick of pressing each silver fillet into a plate of seasoned oatmeal before laying it in a hot, dry skillet. The oatmeal crisped into a nutty crust, while the oily flesh cooked through, rich and soft beneath. Served with a wedge of lemon and a slice of bread and butter, it was a meal that cost little but fed deeply. Scottish and northeastern families swore by it, a habit passed from grandmother to mother. Yet as supermarkets pushed cod fingers and frozen fillets, the herring lost its place. Today, this oatmealed supper survives only in the memories of those who grew up near the harbour. Number 22. Tinned tomatoes and bacon on fried bread was the breakfast for tea that anchored countless weeknights when money ran thin before payday. A single rasher or two, the cheapest streaky cut, was crisped in the skillet. Then a tin of tomatoes was tipped in to bubble down in the bacon fat until thick and glossy. Slices of bread fried in the same pan, drinking up the smoky juices. By 1972, a tin of tomatoes cost around 10p, and bacon ends could be had for a song from the corner butcher. The whole supper came together in under 15 minutes on one ring, a blessing during the power cuts when a working hob was not guaranteed. Children mopped the plate with the fried bread. Mothers stretched 2 rashers across 4 hungry mouths. It was humble, fast, and forgiving. Today we call it brunch and pay £6 for it. Back then it was simply Tuesday. Number 21. Welsh rarebit rose above plain cheese on toast with a richness that made it a proper supper rather than a snack. Housewives melted a knob of butter in the skillet, stirred in grated cheese, a splash of milk or ale, a spoon of mustard, and a shake of Worcestershire sauce until it turned into a thick, savoury sauce. This was poured over toast and slid briefly under the grill to blister and brown. The smell of melting cheese and mustard filled the kitchen on cold evenings. A wedge of cheese was dear, so this was a way to make a little go far, spread thin and rich across thick slices. Children begged for the corners where the cheese had bubbled over and caught. For many a Welsh and Border family, this was Friday tea, eaten by the fire as the wireless played. Today it survives in gastropubs at inflated prices, but the everyday rarebit has slipped quietly away. Number 20. Gammon steak with a ring of pineapple was the height of 1970s sophistication, a dish borrowed from the Burney Inn and carried proudly into the family kitchen. Housewives fried a thick gammon steak in the skillet until the fat crisped and the edges caught, then laid a glistening ring of tinned pineapple on top to warm through, its syrup mingling with the salty meat. A tin of pineapple rings cost around 15 pence, and the combination of sweet and salt felt impossibly glamorous to children raised on plainer fare. Served with chips and a grilled tomato, it was the supper you cooked when you wanted to impress, the taste of eating out brought home. The pairing seemed daring, even modern, the very flavor of a decade discovering the wider world. Yet as tastes shifted and the Burney Inns closed, gammon and pineapple came to feel dated. Today it raises a knowing smile rather than an appetite. Number 19. Curried mince with sultanas was Britain's gentle, hesitant first step into the world of spice, a dish that bore little resemblance to anything from the subcontinent. Housewives browned a pound of mince in the skillet with an onion, then stirred in a spoonful of mild curry powder, a handful of sultanas, and a chopped apple for sweetness. A splash of stock, and it simmered down into a thick, fruity, faintly spiced supper served over rice or with a slice of bread. Curry powder from a tin cost a few pence and lasted months, dusty and timid. The sultanas plumped in the sauce, the apple melted away, and the whole thing tasted of cautious adventure. Children found it exotic, fathers found it odd, but everyone ate it. It was the curry of a nation not yet brave enough for the real thing. As proper Indian takeaways spread, this sweetened imitation quietly disappeared, remembered now with a fond shudder. Number 18. Black pudding with a fried egg was the working man's supper, a dish dense enough to fuel a shift down the pit or on the factory floor. Thick slices of the dark blood sausage were fried in the skillet until the edges crisped and split, revealing the studded cubes of white fat inside. Then an egg was cracked alongside to fry in the same rich fat. In the north, black pudding was a source of fierce local pride, sold fresh by the link from pork butchers on every high street. A few slices cost mere pennies and filled a man for hours. The smell was earthy and unmistakable, the taste rich and iron-heavy. Mothers served it for tea as readily as breakfast, paired with fried bread to soak the yolk. Children learned early that this was serious food. Today, black pudding enjoys a fashionable revival in restaurants, but the everyday skillet supper has largely faded north of memory. Number 17. Deviled kidneys carried a fierce, peppery heat that made them a favorite of fathers and a trial for cautious children. Lamb or pig kidneys, bought for a few pence at the butcher, were trimmed, halved, and tossed into a hot skillet with butter, then finished with mustard, a shake of cayenne, and a splash of Worcestershire sauce that hissed and steamed against the pan. The kidneys cooked fast, turning from pink to bronze in minutes, the sauce thickening into something dark and fiery. Served on toast or with mashed potato, it was a supper that announced itself by smell alone, sharp and spicy through the house. This was a dish with Victorian roots that lingered stubbornly into the 70s, a relic of grander tables adapted for thrifty kitchens. Children wrinkled their noses at the strong taste and stranger texture. As offal fell from favor, deviled kidneys vanished almost entirely, surviving now only in old recipe books and hotel breakfasts. Number 16. Spam hash stretched a single tin into a hot, filling supper with nothing more than potatoes, an onion, and a heavy skillet. Housewives diced cold boiled potatoes and the pink loaf into small cubes, fried them with onion in dripping until the edges crisped and browned, then pressed the lot down to form a golden crust. A tin of spam and a few potatoes made a meal for 4, all cooked on one ring for under 30 pence. The sizzle and the smell of frying onion meant tea was close. Children fought over the crispiest corners where the potato had caught and crackled. It was a dish of pure economy, born of tinned meat thrift and the refusal to waste a single cold spud. Quick, hot, and forgiving, it was the answer to a long day and a thin purse. As fresh and frozen convenience took over, this humble hash slipped quietly from the weekly table. Number 15. Smoked haddock with a poached egg was the gentle supper of 100 British kitchens, comforting and pale and faintly luxurious. A fillet of the golden dyed fish was laid in a skillet with a little milk and butter, simmered softly until it flaked, while an egg poached in the same buttery liquor. The bright yellow yolk broke over the smoky fish, mingling with the milk into something rich and soothing. Smoked haddock cost a little more than plain white fish, so this was a supper for the better weeks, served with bread and butter to soak the sauce. The smell was mild and savory, the kind that made a child feel cared for. It was the food of recovery, served to the poorly and the tired alike. Yet as fish counters dwindled and tastes turned to breaded and frozen, the gentle poached egg supper faded. Today it survives mostly on breakfast menus, a ghost of its former place at tea. Number 14. A pork chop with fried apple rings was the Sunday-feeling supper squeezed onto a weeknight, a dish that paired the cheapest cut with a touch of sweetness. Housewives fried a single chop in the skillet until the fat crackled and the meat browned, then added rings of apple to soften and caramelize in the porky juices. A chop cost more than mince but less than a proper joint, and one each was a small Tuesday triumph. The apple turned golden and tart sweet, cutting through the rich meat, a pairing that felt clever and complete. Served with mash and a spoon of peas, it was a meal that asked little of the cook, but rewarded the table. The smell of frying pork and sweet apple filled the house and drew children to the kitchen door. As convenience meals replaced the patience of the pan, this simple, satisfying supper slipped from the weeknight rotation and quietly disappeared. Number 13. Sausage and onion supper was the dish that made a half-dozen bangers feed a whole family, the workhorse of the frugal week. Housewives fried a ring of cheap sausages in the skillet until burnished, then heaped in sliced onions to soften and brown in the rendered fat, sometimes tipping in a tin of beans or a splash of gravy to bind it. Sausages were among the cheapest meat going, a pound feeding 4 with onions doing the stretching. The smell of frying bangers and onions was the smell of tea time itself, drifting out to children playing in the street. Served with mash or thick bread, it was hot, filling, and endlessly reliable. Fathers came home to it on dark winter evenings, grateful for the steam rising off the plate. It asked for no skill, only a hot pan and patience. Today the sausage survives, but this simple skillet supper has given way to the oven tray. Number 12. Egg and chips was the supper that needed no recipe, no occasion, and barely any money, yet held a place in British hearts that fancier food never could. Chips were fried in a skillet of bubbling fat until crisp and golden, then an egg or two cracked in to fry at the edge, the white crisping and the yolk staying soft. Potatoes were pennies and eggs cheap, making this the meal you reached for when there was nothing else. And somehow it never disappointed. The smell of chip fat hung in the kitchen and on the clothes. Children dipped chips into the runny yolk, the simplest pleasure of the week. For students, single men, and tired mothers alike, egg and chips was the great equalizer, asking nothing and giving comfort. It felt humble to the point of invisibility. Yet as oven chips and ready meals took over, even this, the most basic of suppers, slipped from daily life. Number 11. Rissoles turned yesterday's leftover meat into today's hot supper, a dish of pure resourcefulness fried crisp in the skillet. Housewives minced cold roast beef or lamb, mixed it with mashed potato, onion, and a beaten egg, shaped the lot into flat patties, and fried them until brown and crusty. Coated in breadcrumbs or a dusting of flour, they sizzled in the dripping until the outside crackled and the inside warmed through. Nothing from Sunday's joint was ever wasted, and rissoles were the proof, a Monday or Tuesday meal conjured from scraps. The smell of frying meat and onion filled the kitchen, and children never guessed they were eating leftovers. Served with gravy and greens, they felt like a proper meal rather than a salvage operation. This was thrift dressed up as supper, the kind of clever economy every mother knew by heart. As roasts shrank and leftovers dwindled, the rissole quietly faded from the British table. Number 10. Faggots and peas brought the rich, offal heavy taste of the Midlands to the skillet, a dish that wasted nothing and fed many. Butchers sold faggots, savoury balls of minced pig's liver, heart, and breadcrumbs bound in caul fat for just a few pence each. Housewives fried them gently in the pan, then let them simmer in a thick onion gravy until tender and glistening. Served with a mound of mushy peas and a slick of that dark gravy, it was a supper of deep, earthy flavour beloved across the Black Country and beyond. The smell of frying offal and onions was strong and unmistakable, a taste of the old ways. Children mopped the gravy with bread, while fathers ate with relish, remembering leaner times. Tinned faggots later appeared on shelves, a pale shadow of the butcher's own. As offal fell from grace, the everyday faggot supper retreated, surviving now only in regional pride and fond, vivid memory. Number 9. Kedgeree carried a whisper of empire into the British kitchen, a curried rice supper that bridged breakfast and tea with equal ease. Housewives flaked smoked haddock into a skillet of rice fried with onion and a spoon of curry powder, then folded in chopped hard-boiled egg and a knob of butter, until the whole pan turned warm and golden. A leftover from the days of the Raj, kedgeree lingered in 70s kitchens as a clever way to stretch fish and rice into a filling meal. The mild spice, the smoky fish, and the richness of the egg made it comforting rather than fiery. The smell was gentle and intriguing, unlike anything else on the weekly menu. Some served it for Sunday breakfast, others for a light supper, all from a single pan. It felt faintly grand, a dish with a story. Yet as the decade turned and tastes changed, kedgeree slipped quietly from everyday kitchens into nostalgia. Number 8. Savoury mince on toast was the supper of countless thrifty tea times, a dish that turned the cheapest meat into something warm and filling. Housewives browned mince in the skillet with onion, stirred in a spoon of flour to thicken, then added stock, a shake of Worcestershire sauce, and sometimes a handful of peas, simmering it down into a rich brown gravy thick with meat. A pound of mince fed the family with bread or mash doing the stretching, costing little more than 30 pence. Spooned over toast or piled onto mash, it was hot, savory, and endlessly adaptable. The smell of frying mince and onion was the very scent of tea time in a working household. Children ate it without question. Fathers found it honest and filling. It was the blank canvas of the frugal kitchen, the meal a mother could always conjure. As jars and packets took over, this simple skillet mince slipped from the everyday table. Number 7. Pan-haggerty was the layered potato supper of the Northeast, a dish of 3 humble ingredients transformed by patience and a heavy pan. Housewives layered thin slices of potato, onion, and grated cheese in a skillet slicked with dripping, then cooked it low and slow until the bottom crisped into a golden crust and the cheese melted into molten threads. It asked for nothing more than a few pennies worth of vegetables and the last of the cheese, yet delivered a supper rich enough to satisfy the hungriest farmhand. The smell of frying onion and bubbling cheese filled the cold cottage kitchen. The careful flip to brown both sides was a small act of pride. Served straight from the pan, it was warmth made edible on a bitter Northumberland night. This was hearth food, slow and unhurried, the very opposite of convenience. As kitchens modernized and patience grew scarce, pan-haggerty faded from everyday tables into regional memory. Number 6. Mince and tatties anchored the Scottish weeknight with an honesty that needed no garnish or flourish. Housewives browned beef mince with onion in the skillet, simmered it in a thin gravy thickened with a shake of oatmeal or flour, and served it alongside a mound of floury mashed potatoes. The dish asked for nothing fancy, only good mince and a little patience, yet it satisfied the whole family from Glasgow tenements to Highland crofts. By the mid-70s, mince and tatties appeared on tables across Scotland with near religious regularity, the supper of 100 Tuesday nights. The smell of frying onion and browning meat signaled that the day's work was nearly done. Children mashed the potato into the gravy, drawing patterns on the plate, while parents watched with quiet approval. It was comfort without pretension, the taste of home itself. As lean packs and convenience foods crept in, the slow, simmered version of old quietly faded. Number 5. Liver and bacon with onion gravy divided the British table as sharply as any dish, beloved and loathed in equal measure. Slices of lamb or pig's liver were fried fast in a hot skillet, just a minute each side before they turned tough, then smothered in soft caramelized onions and a thick, dark gravy. A rasher or two of bacon crisped alongside, lending its smoke to the pan. Liver cost a fraction of steak, making it the affordable answer to a family's hunger for meat, and it was rich in iron besides. The smell was strong and metallic, drawing complaints from children and praise from parents who insisted on clean plates. Served with mash and a pool of gravy, it was a proper, filling supper. The timing was everything. A minute too long and it spoiled. As offal fell from fashion and butchers closed, liver and bacon faded from the weekly menu, surviving now as a nostalgic curiosity. Number 4. Lobscouse, or simply scouse, simmered in the pans of Liverpool with a thrift so legendary it gave the city's people their nickname. Housewives browned cheap stewing beef or lamb in a heavy pot, then piled in potatoes, onions, and carrots, letting the whole lot cook down low until the potatoes collapsed and thickened the broth into something hearty and warming. When meat ran short, families made blind scouse, the same dish with no meat at all, and ate it without shame. A pot of scouse cost a few pence and fed everyone, stretched endlessly with bread and red cabbage on the side. The smell drifted through the docklands terraces, a signal of warmth against the river chill. Children ate bowl after bowl. Fathers came home from the docks to its steam. It was identity in a pot, the very soul of a city. As convenience took hold, the daily scouse pot grew rare, kept alive now by stubborn local pride. Number 3. Bubble and Squeak turned Sunday's leftovers into Monday's supper, a dish of pure economy named for the very sound it made in the pan. Housewives gathered cold mashed potato and leftover cabbage from the roast, sometimes with a stray carrot or sprout, pressed them into a hot skillet and fried until the underside crisped into a brown, crackling crust. The vegetables hissed and squeaked as they hit the fat, a reminder that nothing in the post-war kitchen went to waste. A spoon of bacon fat or a scrap of leftover meat made it richer, but the heart of it was humble. The smell of frying cabbage divided households, children wrinkling their noses while fathers claimed the crispy brown bits were the best part. It was a meal born of discipline, the weekly answer to feeding many on little. Today it survives mostly as a brunch side, but once this golden skillet cake was the main event itself. Number 2, eggy bread and beans, or, as some knew it, fried bread soldiers with a tin of beans, was the children's tea-turned supper that fed a generation on pennies. Slices of bread were soaked in beaten egg, fried in the skillet until golden and puffed, then served alongside a hot tin of baked beans bubbling in the same pan's corner. Bread, an egg, and a tin of beans cost barely 20 pence and made a meal that children adored above almost anything. The egg-soaked bread crisped at the edges and stayed soft within, the perfect vehicle for the sweet tomato sauce of the beans. The smell of frying egg and warming beans meant tea was on the table. Mothers reached for it on the thinnest nights and the busiest ones alike, knowing it never failed. It was simple to the point of genius, a supper a child could almost cook themselves. As tastes grew grander, this most innocent of skillet suppers slipped away. And finally, in first place, corned beef hash crowned the British One-Skillet supper, the ultimate emblem of feeding a family on a single tin and a few potatoes. Housewives diced cold boiled potatoes and a brick of corned beef shipped from Argentina, fried them with onion in dripping until the edges caught and crisped, then pressed the lot down into the pan to form a deep golden crust that broke apart in savory, salty chunks. A tin cost around 25 pence in the mid-70s, and stretched with spuds, it fed 4 or 5 with ease. The sharp metallic tang of the meat mingled with frying onion, a smell that meant comfort and security at once. During the power cuts of the 3-day week, when the oven stood cold and dark, this one-ring supper kept the family fed by candlelight. Children fought over the crispiest corners, fathers ate it gratefully after long shifts, and not a scrap was ever left. It was the taste of making do raised to an art form, hot and reliable. Yet as fresh meat and freezers became the new normal, corned beef hash vanished almost overnight. Its disappearance marks the quiet end of an era when one pan, one ring, and a little ingenuity could feed a whole family through the hardest of times. There they are, 25. Forgotten one-skillet suppers that once fed Britain through power cuts, thin wage packets, and long winter nights. Every one of them was born of the same spirit: a heavy pan, a single ring, and a refusal to waste a thing. Which of these did your mum or nan still make? Tell me in the comments which one you would bring back tonight. And don't forget to subscribe for more taste of the Britain we let slip away.